Hey Taylor, great to hear you back on the mic, and I'm looking forward to your journey into changing the podcast. It was fun to hear DragonRaid. I'm curious if you actually played it or not. Even at my most fundamentalist time, I thought that was pretty ridiculous. But it was an interesting goal to try to achieve, and I suppose when it was created, just thinking about making a campaign setting instead of a complete rule set. I don't know how maybe the creator felt that Dungeons and Dragons was tainted too much to just use it as is with its own campaign setting. But I haven't looked too much into researching it, but I'm certainly curious about it and wondering what your experience with it is. Thanks and take care.
Hey there, brother. Thank you for calling in. It's good to hear your voice, and happy holidays. I hope you and your family had a great Christmas, same as ours did, and I hope the new year treats you better than we deserve. For those of you who do not recognize the voice, that is Mirke the Meek. He is a fellow podcaster in the OSR indie RPG ecosystem. He runs games with his kids, his daughters, which is always fun to listen to, and gives me hope that one day my boys will pay attention close enough to run or play on our own. In addition, he's got an itch.io page. I'll link that in the show notes in case you want to get to know him a little better. It looks like everything up there for free, so not kind of grifting you or anything, and it's just some useful stuff like there's a hex paper printout and some generators, and so nothing, no sponsorship or anything, but anyway, again, Mirke, thank you for calling in. And he does have a real name, but why would we use that? We're on the internet. So, DragonRaid. What is DragonRaid? Well, it's a role-playing game, a learning game, originally written in 1984, but kept up to speed as late as 2018. There are different versions copyrighted up through to 1999, but as evidenced by the fact that we're talking about it, it's still around. The basic premise, and it is not my intent to make this episode kind of a review of the product, but the basic premise is your player characters are light raiders, and they adventure in a setting called Eden again. You work under the guidance of the Overlord, the Lord of Many Names, and the principle is he sends you out on missions and you do stuff. And Mirke, to answer your question directly, and I know for the benefit of Mirke specifically, I recognize that we kind of talked about this on Discord, so some of this might be a little rehash. But have I played it? No, I have not. In 1984, I was not playing role-playing games, suffice to say, in that I'm only about 40 years old. But in 95 and 98, when the revised editions came out, I would have been kind of transitioning into 3rd edition. I actually never heard of DragonRaid until I was well into adulthood. At that time, it was portrayed to me as kind of a non-game. It was essentially a evangelical facade. In fairness, it's kind of not. There is actually a game underneath there. At a glance, your character abilities, they're not called abilities, they're called character strengths. And they are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and I'll let you guess the others based on what we've defined as fruits of the Spirit. So you can sort of see the justification for the accusation that it's kind of a proselytizing tool. Furthermore, your character uses armor, but you don't like buy chainmail kind of thing. You have the Ephesians 6 armor of God that you reference, the belt of truth, the helmet of salvation, and so on. And further, you have character skills. The skills are calculated, GURPS style, where each individual skill, including different weapons that you use, those are calculated based on your character strengths. So, for example, say blend with surroundings, which is 2 times. I should have rehearsed this before I said it. 2 times SC plus PA plus 2EN divided by 5. So if I look up to the fruits of the Spirit, we have self-control, peace, and endurance. Now, endurance is not a fruit of the Spirit. Endurance is a character ability which is calculated based on a bunch of other stuff. So we have joy, peace, and so on. So there's a kind of nested derivation of that. So it's a little bit convoluted, but you can calculate it once and then run with it. So kind of like pummeling and overbearing, people who complain that it's complicated are the people who don't realize you can calculate it before the session, write it down, and then just use that reference number. There are also weapons given. So I was kind of expecting to see the Sword of the Spirit in here, but the weapon listing is actually real medieval weapons. So we have battle axe, crossbow, and so on down to sword, and each of this has a formula to determine your skill with it. For example, the sword is based on endurance, agility, and some other things, and has a damage of 1 to 10. That should be familiar to folks who have used two-handed swords in most OSR games, but as a chainmail enthusiast myself, I'm kind of curious how that sword would fare against the breastplate of righteousness, because I am aware that the two-handed sword, off of which that D10 is based, rolls a 6 or better on 2d6 in order to hit. So that if you couple in the shield of faith, that's a 7. But there again, we are just playing a game. Does DragonRaid fail as a game? Or did it fail? Well, it kind of comes down to what your definition of failure is, in a sense, but at the same time, we can kind of speak to a little bit. Regarding the rules, I don't think it necessarily fails as a game, per se. It does have different equipment you can get. It sets itself up as sort of a narrative kind of experience, but it's hard to say because I don't actually have the rule book. Unlike what we're used to with D&D inspired systems, there's a player booklet, the Light Rider Manual, an Adventure Master Manual, which is kind of a DMG, but the rule book with the actual mechanics is separate. I was able to acquire the first two. Thank you so much to my Discord buddies, you know who you are, who helped me find and get those into my hands. But looking for a full set of the booklets to get the rulebook itself, the cheapest one I could find on eBay was $150, and that is more than I'm intending to spend on a podcast episode. So the availability isn't what it could be. So if distribution is a thing, and admittedly it might have been better distributed in 1990 when it was still new, but if distribution is an issue, why not a campaign setting? This is a question that Mirke raises. Well, if I were to guess, recall the game came out in 1984. Gary was still at TSR in 1984. Then we see the subsequent revisions happen in like 95 and 99. Those were the Lorraine years, the second edition years. And the OGL did not come out until third edition. That was a WotC product or policy. And regardless of what failings that WotC may have, the OGL is not among them. OGL was awesome. Prior to that, though, the acronym we used to joke, TSR, stood for They Sue Regularly. So even if maintaining compatibility is legal, for example, if my company makes, say, roof rack rails for Hondas, Honda cannot stop me from saying these are compatible with your Honda of make model XYZ. I may have purchased one of these and installed it on my car. That's how I know. But it's not saying that this works with your product is not constant. That doesn't violate intellectual property. In the same sense, saying this is compatible with X game probably wouldn't. But at the same time, recall the Gary and Frank follow-up game, Dangerous Dimensions or something like that. They were sued. They won their lawsuit, but their pockets were a lot shallower than TSR's were at the time, and their fledgling company and that game went under anyway. Based on experience, I probably would not have done, and I didn't interview anybody or anything, but I probably would not have done a campaign setting either. Doing your own game twofold allows you to kind of weave in the mechanics you want to reinforce the experience. And talking about character advancement, I've talked in the past about experience for gold. The reason you do XP for gold in an OSR game is to inspire characters to loot treasure, and that's the gameplay you want to promote. So you can forge the skills, the advancement to kind of guide the players into an experience. And so, two good reasons: one, not get sued into oblivion; two, guide your experience. So that's probably why they went with their own game. In terms of reception, the game was received fairly poorly. The religious right didn't like it. The people who were burning D&D books didn't. They thought this was just as bad. And then the people who were not burning D&D books, who were having their books burned, didn't like it either because they felt like it was a ham-fisted intrusion into the space. While it does have some interesting mechanics that would then go into other games, that kind of it didn't fit into either camp, which is super strange because there's a great little piece in the Adventure Master Manual, which I will kind of read to you from the author, called that talks to, quote, the allegory of DragonRaid. It says, "By now you've probably realized that the Overlord of Many Names is really another name for Jesus Christ. You have recognized other figures too, and you may be asking, why not use the name of Jesus Christ instead of saying the Overlord of Many Names? This brings us to the definition of allegory, the expression of spiritual truths by the use of fictional figures, or simply a symbolic narratives. In other words, an allegory is a familiar story told in a new and fresh way. But again, you may ask, is it right to use allegory? Is it really necessary? Yes, it is, because sometimes people have heard things about Jesus Christ or about Christianity to which they have developed very definite responses, both positive and negative. These learned responses may block any further input. By using an allegory to retell those spiritual truths, the game provides a comfortable and non-threatening learning experience." This, I feel like the game utterly fails here. That's not to say that it references real Christian names throughout, because it doesn't. It does stick to its allegory, but the mechanics are really super obvious. So there are Bible verses that are listed next to your character abilities, the fruits of the Spirit. There are Bible verses that are listed next to the armor of God that you wear, and there's a literal mechanic. They don't have wizards like you would in a D&D type game, but they have what they call word runes, which is literally scripture. In order to use spells or spell equivalents in the game, you have to memorize Bible verses. So at that point, it is not allegory at all. It is straight up memorization. Now, as a practicing Christian myself, I am not opposed to memorization of scripture. I am actively trying to memorize it myself, but not in my game. If you're trying to make an allegory and there's guides on how to pray to the Overlord, which is probably why the evangelical right did not like this game, because it had prayers to a name that wasn't so yeah, I can sort of see why they didn't like it either. But the allegory breaks down because of the very obvious insertion of real biblical references, and it specifies which version too. It's like the original version had the original NIV, and the newer version's updated for the newer NIV when it came out, and it's really, really obvious. There is no allegory, and if the author is attempting to get people to play the game and learn about Christianity without their predispositions, utter failure. It is too it's obvious, and it almost comes off as duplicitous. I'm confident that the author was not trying to be duplicitous. To be clear, I will not talk garbage about the author of this, but the way this is presented, it's like, no, this isn't Bible study. surprise, Bible verses. So it's like a bait and switch almost when you get to these mechanics. In that sense, it's going to hit the same nerve a lot of people with negative connotations have. So could you play this at church youth group? Probably, but you're not going to win anybody over at Dan's hobby store downtown. There are other things in the book that are useful, like there's a great section talking about dealing with disruptive players, how to prevent cheating, maintaining balance, handling character death, how to like some evaluations of your own performance as the referee, talking about marching order, how to keep there's a handful of pre-gen characters and monsters. So there's a great deal of useful stuff in here, some of which is specific to the game and some of which like dealing with problem players or how to become a better game master. That's valuable everywhere. So you can, it doesn't matter what you're playing, that's still valuable. But again, all of this is kind of overshadowed by the word rune system, and in addition to some of the other less than subtle allegorical content. So that in mind, does it fail? Well, I will not say no one was saved because they played it, but I also won't say that I probably would not have been. I'm also not the target audience, and I'm not sure if that's bad. And I have thoughts on this. I'll go into it when I talk about what my game is doing. What am my table doing? Well, recently I had been running games for my children, so I have not been able to play online with friends. It's been hard to get time kind of scheduled. Additionally, I hadn't really been able to do a lot of solo gaming. Work got kind of intense, and we had some other obligations with the family, but more as the weather had turned, I'd introduced my boys to Ode to 74, which that is too complicated for a 7-year-old. He can figure out the math behind it, but there's too many steps, too many rules to remember, and it's hard enough to keep him in his light radius when they're exploring the dungeon. So maybe move over to Advanced OSE or regular OSE. I have those books on my shelf that I might as well use, but we'll see. I've also been working on a side project. I haven't really called it anything yet. Maybe call it Kid Mail. Have it be a skirmish war game, chainmail reminiscent, with some Ode to 74 or original edition trappings thrown on top of it to make it a real game, but just make it easier to process. Chubby Funster did a video recently on cognitive load, where he talked about what kind of things that you as the ref and the players are going to remember. And even if my boys can read, they are good at the arithmetic, and one of them's even doing times tables already, which is impressive. But their working memory. Their working memory isn't necessarily able to keep everything in mind for a game that was aimed at college and above. So, will I be playing more Ode to 74? Maybe. I'll probably play more Kid Mail. But what will I not be playing? I will not be playing DragonRaid. Again, that's not to harp on DragonRaid, but it is to say that I think it's just not my kind of game. For the benefit of my audience, I know what you guys are into. As you have already established, DragonRaid is not OSR at all. It's not even, it doesn't try to be, it predates the OSR. It actually came out during the OS era, so the OSR couldn't have existed, and it really represents the direction that RPGs went in the 1990s. Kind of away, so D&D is at its core class-based, and the reason you do that, in the older editions at least, is so that you can kind of mix and match characters, you can mix and match players, and it's easy to run in a club. By comparison, by the 90s, there was a lot more home play, or at least emphasis on it. So you have more emphasis on the characters. There's skill systems that allow you more customization, which again, that it's a different style of game. It's very player character focused, not party campaign focused, if that makes sense. Further, DragonRaid is a story game. It straight up is. There is a section in the back where it talks about in some role-playing games, the party is encouraged to act in a sandbox style, but that doesn't work in DragonRaid because, quote, DragonRaid is trying to teach particular virtues. Again, I am pro those virtues, but if I'm playing a game with my children, I want their choices to matter. I want them to own their actions. I think that's a better learning experience for them. The games I've run for them, I've used more puzzles than I have combats, just to keep their cognitive. And apparently I gave them easy puzzles because they just kind of breezed through them. But where I was going with that is I do take them to church. We do family devotionals with them. So again, we are a Christian household, but I don't think I need to use the gaming table to force that issue. Now, if bad things happen to their characters or if their characters make mistakes, does that mean the virtue is not taught? Of course not. Look at Daniel. My one of the favorite verses at the end of Genesis is when his father passes and his brothers are worried they're going to get the short end of the stick. He says, no, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. He looks back on being kidnapped, sold, imprisoned under false pretenses, and then God allowed all of that, but used it for good. And at the end of the day, he saves Israel by incorporating them into Egypt during the years of famine. And so just because it looks dark now doesn't mean God's not in control. And once you know that, it's okay for your PC to lose. So with that in mind, how am I implementing this in my game? Well, the alignment system is perfect for this. Because you think about it, clerics, look at the spell list. The spell list for clerics are all miracles from the Bible. And so, first and foremost, I renamed the spells to miracles, and I put a scripture reference to where they're from. For example, Cure Light Wounds, Luke 22. And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear, but Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. So, one sword strike, d6 damage, one cure, d6 plus 1. And I've done that for every one of the miracles or cleric spells that they're able to get a hold of. Further, the magic user is in the appendix. I've allowed what I've called the Sneak Thief. The Sneak Thief being a dex-based kind of dungeon utility character modeled off of the pre-Greyhawk Thief, and so that's a core thing. I moved magic user to the appendix. So it's possible to be one, but we recall the sorcerers in the Book of Acts burning their spellbooks, and we recall Simon the sorcerer being rebuked by Peter for trying to buy his way into power. While magic users a la Gandalf fit the fiction, it's something I have to think about more deeply, and you have to kind of engage with more carefully while using the game as a reinforcement mechanism. So I'm trying to stay separate from that while retaining the benefit magic gives you in the game itself to keep that compatibility. So I'd be able to play this, I can run B2 in this, and it would still be feasible for the party to succeed. Magic users are still there. They can be chaotic or they can be neutral. They may not serve law, because you look at the 3 Hearts, 3 Lions, you look at the Broken Sword, 2 appendix in pieces that I would argue inspired the alignment system in original Dungeons and Dragons. The law is very clearly the church. The law is very clearly the Big C church kind of rolling across the countryside. And there's a scene in the Broken Sword in particular where the witch is trying to curse the protagonist, and Satan comes out and says that the bright Christ is coming across the land, and against him I can do nothing. But, and then the witch is able to get back at the Danes by having the elves kidnap his infant son before he's baptized. And so that's sort of a balance between chaos and law. And so the cleric can serve law. The cleric can be neutral, but he cannot advance above a certain level. That's rules is written already. Turning undead and unhallowed, anybody can do that if they have the holy symbol. The holy symbol is explicitly the cross. Again, that's actually rules is written from the original game, but the priest cleric gets to double their level for the purposes of benefiting from it. Again, I should probably put this out there. I'll get it in a presentable place and I'll put it out as a PDF, and you guys can tell me if it sucks or how it sucks. But and then we have the standard monsters, semi-inspired by Down in the Dungeon by Don Greer. The book, it's a PDF you can find. It's not hard to find if you just if you know where to search for it. It illustrates Zacharan's dungeon, has a bunch of little monsters in it, and so it's great. Great little inspiration. Feels fresh even if it's published in 1981. I've kept a lot of the chainmail man-to-man stuff, like some of the morale. I'm trying to figure out how to handle fantasy combat, but I think I'll get there, and I'll definitely try to put out some APs for that just as I keep moving, and then make that for a wider test. But for now, just going to play it with the kids and run what I have. And so that's what I'm doing. Running the same style of game, running the same set of rules, and using it as a reinforcement mechanism, not as a primary teaching medium. Thank you, Mirke, for your call in, and I thank you again for the encouragement talking about changing the podcast. To be fair, I don't feel like I'm changing the podcast per se. The podcast has always been about what I'm thinking about as it pertains to gaming and how my gaming life is kind of operating. And my gaming life is changing a little bit. I'm still playing the same kind of paradigm. I'm still doing the OSR deal. I want to be authentic. I want to be authentic to who I am, to how I play, and since starting this hobby, I've encountered so many people who share my convictions and share my faith, and I just wanted to be widely known. It's okay to be Christian and game. And that's how you bring people into it, honestly. I've talked about evangelizing the hobby. The best way I've brought people into OSR gaming is not having raided the local 5e or Pathfinder groups. It's bringing normies in, introducing people who enjoy Appendix N style literature or Appendix N style movies, and then playing games with them. And they come in and they enjoy the hobby. They get involved. In the same way, if we run a good game, then people will play in the good game. DragonRaid claims that it is an allegory, and it does so to try to soften things. I think that's doing both the players and the allegory a disservice, so I won't. The law will be God, singular. You don't have to be a Christian in my game. You can serve neutral, you can play chaos. That's fine. But the point of the game is to play the game. If the game is awesome, then we are able to connect on something we care about. The non-Christian and the Christian can still sit at the same table and play a game and enjoy the game. The same way a Christian and a non-Christian can watch football and enjoy football. And so it's all about exposing people to what's there, and if they have a negative reaction to it, that's on them. I won't force you to play at my table. I would love you to play at my table, but I won't force you to play at my table. It's just the way it is. No one is stopping you from running your own. No one is stopping me from playing in someone else's table. I'm not going to pray to Corellian Larathian, but and at the end of the day, it's all about connecting to people with the hobby and making sure that my children are in an environment that is in line with my morals and my convictions. Raise them up in the way they should go, and they will not depart from it. So them's my 2 cents. So I will probably not be playing DragonRaid, but I will definitely still be playing some more dungeon game. So half product review, half call in. Thank you, Mirke, for your call. You gave me a whole episode worth to talk about. And that just about wraps up this episode of the Whispering GM podcast. Thank you for sticking with me, and Merry Christmas, everyone. This was supposed to come out on Christmas Day. Apparently I have some work to do on my time tracking. But in either case, we have between now and the Epiphany to continue to celebrate. So Merry Christmas, all. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Mirke, for calling in. And thank you, God, for the shared hobby, because at the end of the day, you're the only one who glues us together. Delve on, listeners. Delve on.